Hello, friends. Did you miss us? Yes, we are finally back with another episode of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. This is the show where we talk about the latest and greatest new packages, blog posts, other terrific resources that are featured in the highlights section of this week's Our Weekly issue. My name is Eric Nance, and yes, we had a little bit of a break, both self-imposed and some unexpected reasons for the break, but nonetheless, we're coming back, hopefully refreshed. And for me personally, I was able to take the family on a little road trip to Niagara Falls early in July. It was a spectacular time. And if you haven't been in that area, if you have the means to do it, I highly recommend that as a future vacation. It was I drove there, so that was a long drive, but made it through in one piece, which is sometimes a miracle in of itself when you have two kids that are angry at on highways going through farmland, as the Midwest typically is. But nonetheless, back here in the humble abode here, and I'm very pleased, as always, to be joined from my awesome co-host, Mike, who's had his own adventures, both good and probably not so good lately. But Mike, how you doing
I'm doing
today?
well, Eric. I am as equally impressed in your R and Shiny skills as I am in your skills taking your family halfway cross country with two young boys in a car for that long. So kudos to you and a successful vacation. I got some vacation time with my family in Vermont as well over the 4th of July here, our Independence Day. And happy that we were able to have the break, but also very happy to be back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking, it just doesn't seem right. And now all is right with the world. It's a great recording session with you. And we've got a couple awesome highlights to talk about today. And this issue has been curated by Batul Almarzak, another one of our longtime contributors to the Our Weekly project. And as always, she had tremendous help from our fellow Our Weekly team members and contributors like you all around the world with your pull requests and other suggestions. So let's dive right into it. And our first highlight today is a callback from something that we put the spotlight on in episode 156. You can check out the back catalog for that. But you know me, and if you heard the podcast recently, I've been espousing my affection and really big enthusiasm for WebAssembly and WebR in the world of R and web development. And there are a lot of different ways to spin this now. We've been historically talking about the amazing work that George Stagg at Posit's been doing with the WebR package, the WebAssembly framework tie-ins with WebR. It's just immensely powerful. But there are some other perspectives that you can take and really massage these tools to do some interesting use cases. And way back in episode 156 earlier this year, we had talked about Colin Fay's adventures with building his own wrappers on top of WebR and combining with Node.js to kind of fill a perspective of how to efficiently expose functions in R from, say, an R package, what looks to be native functions in a Node.js runtime. And so we got some follow-up on that in our first highlight today because, yes, Colin Fay is back at blogging his recent updates to his webrcli and spidyr utilities that have been coded up in JavaScript to help with this perspective of exposing these great R functions that you can compile with WebR into a Node.js runtime. So what's new? Well, as usual, as you get things bootstrapped for the first time and you start iterating on it, you see some ways to make things more efficient and also helping the new user get onboarded more efficiently. The first of which is that the webrcli package combined with spidyr will help bootstrap a template file for you to start that kind of boilerplate integration of the R functions from a package into the Node.js runtime. And he's been able to simplify the template a bit so that it's about now maybe 10, 11 lines of code. And he's hopeful that even if you're not an expert at JavaScript just yet, they'll be able to grok what's happening here. And I dare say he's mission accomplished on making that a lot more easy to grasp. And he decomposes the explanations of the template in the blog post, where there's a bit of setup to initialize these spidyr projects that's going to help with that handoff, help with that integration. and then helping to import the R functions that have been bootstrapped into the directory where this project's being bootstrapped from. And then you can see then for a simple hello world example, you just put a prefix of R funds dot hello underscore world if that's the name of your R function. And there you go. Now you just called that R function from JavaScript. And what's interesting about that actual execution of it is that this actually doesn't need R at that point to do the execution. It's all already been pre-compiled in the JavaScript. That's just bonkers to me, but it's amazing.
Yeah, no, that was probably the most interesting part of this whole article to me, is that there's no R session running while the Node.js app is running. It's the spidyr package imports an R function converted to a native JS. So I guess that must happen beforehand.
That's my understanding, is in that bootstrapping process as you initialize a project. I believe it's compiling all that in that initial pre-step. So then the Node.js side of it, when you're just executing these functions, it's treated no differently than any other JavaScript function you would run in that. That's just, again, amazing to me. Mind blown 101. Yes, Colin does it again. We should be used to this by now from him after all the Golem exploits. But boy, he always teaches us something new. And then other tidbits in the post here that I think are going to be great from a reproducibility standpoint and efficiency is kind of taking a page of how we do dependency management, is making sure that when you bootstrap a webrcli project, that it will store the packages that are being installed in a packages.json file, so that then if you say move this to another computing environment or whatnot, as long as you version control that lock file, that JSON file, not too dissimilar to what you would do with renv in the typical R setup, it'll bootstrap these packages back down if they're not installed already. So I think that's paving the way for more efficient dependency management in this new workflow. So he's got a nice schematic towards the end of the post where he kind of shows the workflow in a nutshell, which I believe is going to be kind of the source of some additional documentation that he plans to author, as he wants to have more than an N of one of users for this framework. He claims he's the only one using it. I highly doubt that. I'm sure there are others that are putting it through the paces. But he's got some other future items that I'm going to keep an eye on for this, is that in terms of reproducibility, he wants to make sure that when you initialize these projects, that you can actually specify the WebR version itself during that bootstrapping process. I mean, that will be, again, huge as WebR takes more fruition, as companies or organizations start to use this in critical pipelines. Just like with R itself, you want to be able to say, okay, I built this on WebR version, 4 dot whatever. I want to make sure that I can standardize on that for the future. And another tidbit I'll keep a close eye on, we've seen George Stagg mention he's been plugging in ways to install package, WebR compliant R packages from R Universe. That's been a new thing that he and Jerome have been working on. Colin wants to make sure that in this framework, in the WebR CLI, that you can install WebR compliant R packages from R Universe as well. That will be massive for opening the door for additional functionality down the road. So sounds like he's not stopping anytime soon with this. So I'm very curious where he goes. And again, the perspective here I think is definitely important, especially as many in software development, data science pipelines, you may have a team that is writing very intricate, very powerful code via R functions and hence R packages. And maybe they have the luxury of a separate team that's doing all the web interface layouts in their preferred JavaScript framework. This is tailor-made for that scenario. The data science team can configure the business logic in R and doing all the powerful model fitting and everything. And then they just give this compiled with WebR CLI to the web dev team. They're no worse for wear, so to speak. They just call it like they would any JavaScript function. I think it's going to open a lot of possibilities for, again, using WebR and WebAssembly in even more context than initially we realized.
Are you insinuating that the web dev team won't be writing in Shiny?
What?
I'm just teasing. No, I think one of the really interesting things that's starting to go on right now, and obviously Colin is one of the folks who's spearheading that effort, is we have pretty good frameworks for building, what Eric, you and I call like production grade Shiny applications, right? That have sort of a dedicated server component to them. And now that we're moving on to WebR and Shiny Live and things like that, that dedicated server kind of goes away. But up until now, and I don't think we're quite there yet. A lot of the things that you really need to go from just a toy POC app to production, like environment variables and authentication and things like that, haven't really existed in this new WebR and Shiny Live world. But it seems like we're slowly but surely starting to get there, and maybe there is a day coming. I don't know how near or far in the future, where essentially everything that we can do in WebR is equivalent to what we could do, with the old quote unquote framework for building Shiny apps with a dedicated server. And as Colin notes, I believe it's in his WebR CLI utility, that there is a share env function that allows the user to copy one, several, or all environment variables from node to the WebR instance, I think, which is really interesting. It's really important. I don't really build any Shiny apps these days that don't leverage environment variables for secure authentication to a database or something like that. So that's a huge hurdle that I sometimes need to get over when we're looking at new frameworks like this. And it looks like Colin's already thought about some of this stuff to be able to help us out when we do get to that point. And I have not dove too deep yet, admittedly, into WebR and Shiny Live. But yeah, besides seeing what others in the community like yourself, Eric, are doing and building, but I am pretty confident that it's not going to be too far in my future where I'm not going to necessarily have a choice and going to have to start learning about that, because I think that there are quite a lot of benefits here depending on your use case to leverage that WebR framework, and it's just getting better and better every month, every day, every week, it seems like.
Yeah, I always, whenever I see my notifications on Mastodon, a new post from George, I'm always like, okay, read it now, because it's going to be something that I think I'll be able to benefit from very quickly. Yes, this is a new world to us. As I've been, thinking about framing my talk for the upcoming PositConf, and I talk about our adventures of WebR and WebAssembly and the R Consortium pilot submissions, I've always been trying to think of an intuitive way to describe this paradigm shift. Maybe it's not so much a paradigm shift, but it is a change in thinking of, like you said, going from a traditional server-side hosting process to what is now being exposed. In essence, the user's web browser is the new engine. It's the new server. That's where everything's being conducted. And what are the benefits and trade-offs of that? A lot of benefits that we're seeing. I mean, you've heard me mention on previous episodes what we're seeing in Quarto, what we're seeing in being able to build these educational type materials, showcasing the native execution of our code, so the users can not just see examples, but literally play with it in their browser without that need of a Shiny-like server on the back end. That's still one of those use cases that I think is just beginning to really take fruition. And I think it's just only a matter of time as those principles get built into what we're doing in data science pipelines that we've historically done with Shiny. And still, of course, who's the number one fan of Shiny? I'm wearing their t-shirt today, for goodness sakes. Of course I love my Shiny. And to be able to combine it with WebR, I mean, that's still this intersection that I'm very passionate about. And certainly to be abreast of this technology, abreast of what we can do in this space, things like what Colin's doing here with WebR CLI and spidyr, along with the adventures that Bob Rudis has had on his various blog posts and what he's been doing with WebR. He's been just as excited about this as anyone else. So it's great to be well-rounded into like the different ways you can spin this technology. And again, the end product, you're going to be able to build these very sophisticated WebR, WebAssembly powered apps in many different frameworks. That's the key here, right? We're opening so many doors for other teams to get into this. So yeah, I'm it sometimes makes me shake my head just how fast this is moving. But once that initial hurdle got overcame last year with bringing WebR to the R, WebAssembly to the R process itself, the floodgates have opened, and I'm here for it.
Me too.
And rounding out our highlights today, we're going to dive into the world of spatial visualizations, which we touched on quite a few times with some of the amazing efforts in the art community to expose some very powerful frameworks in the mapping and geospatial space. And we got another highlight that is actually more of a function that's exposed into an overall effort that I think is going to be very important for those that are looking to take advantage of innovations in web technology in the spatial visualization space into their R processes. Certainly this has a nice fit for Shiny too that we may touch on as well. And we're talking about the mapgl package, which has been authored by Kyle Walker, who has been featured on previous R Weekly highlights in the past. He runs, I believe, his own consulting company where they do a lot of spatial visualization analysis and visualization. And the mapgl package, this looks really nifty to me because it is, like many in the HTML widget ecosystem, trying to give the R user an intuitive interface to an extremely powerful web-based visualization platform. And there are two of them, to be exact, that this package exposes. It's the mapbox.gl and the mapgl mapping services. They each are slightly different, but yet they're very important use cases. And mapgl is a framework to bring that to the R user very efficiently. And Mike, I don't know if you had a chance to look at their Getting Started vignette that Kyle has on the website. Holy moly, some of the visuals he can produce of this are extremely powerful here.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And I've seen Kyle quite active sharing the progress on this package, this mapgl package, on, I think, Mastodon primarily, maybe LinkedIn as well is where I've seen it. And the amount of new features and development that's going on in the package is incredible. It seems like they're rolling out functionality constantly. And one thing I think that strikes me, as a big takeaway from a lot of what Kyle has been sharing on social media is really the performance of this package and what you're getting from, I think, the underlying APIs, the Mapbox.gl JavaScript and MapLibre GL JavaScript APIs. If I'm not mistaken, those two API services are paid. Maybe you can get a free version, but you will need an access token, I believe.
Yep, you need an access token, depending on which features you want to utilize. I believe you have to pay for at least the first one. The MapLibre one, I'm not so sure. I haven't played with it, carefully, but I know to get started, and once you get the access token, you're good to go for a core set of features.
I think, one of the things that folks doing, pretty heavy geospatial data science run into sometimes is performance, because there's a lot going on screen when it comes to geospatial data. The data can be large in and of itself and sort of heavy when your data is representing polygons and things like that, not just individual points. And then obviously the visual component as well, right? Maps are complex visualizations and traditionally maybe not the quickest visuals to render. But what we're seeing out of the mapgl package right now that Kyle and his team have put together is some incredible enhancements, and it looks like those underlying APIs, those services have done a lot of work to try to make these geospatial visuals as performant as possible. And one of the ones that we're calling out today in the R Weekly highlights is this compare function from mapgl. And it allows you to create a comparison view between two Mapbox.gl or MapLibre.gl maps. And what it'll do is it'll provide this sort of horizontal bar in the middle of the visual itself that you can drag to one side or the other to be able to expose more of either the left map or the right map and compare those two sort of side by side. This is something that we have actually done, quite a bit when we have sort of an overlay often of the same geographic area, but we're trying to maybe represent, two different, data sets on top of that same geographic area. So maybe two separate surveys in the same area, something like that, and you're comparing one to the other. So you have those things side by side, and you can go left and right. Two different simulations, of an ecosystem or something like that. That's things that we have done in the past, leveraging that compare slider widget in the leaflet ecosystem. And this seems to be pretty comparable to a function in leaflet called add map pane. I don't know if there's a more recent one, but that's the last time that I was working with leaflet on exactly that type of problem. We were able to create like a left map and a right map, and the function that we used was add map pane. So this looks, this compare function from mapgl looks quite equivalent to that. Again, these maps look beautiful. The ability to drag left and right is something that users of our apps that have done that when we've implemented it in leaflet have absolutely loved. I think it's probably one of the most favorite pieces of functionality that our end users let us know that they really like on our geospatial data science project. So it's pretty cool to see that also exist here in the mapgl package. And from everything that I'm seeing, if you did want to migrate from leaflet to this mapgl package, it looks fairly straightforward. A lot of the syntax, a lot of the arguments to some of these functions look quite similar. And obviously the visuals at the end of the day aren't necessarily too far apart. So you may be able to migrate fairly quickly and pick up some of those performance gains that it looks like mapgl is able to offer. Or maybe there are just some aspects of mapgl that sort of make more sense to you to use. As opposed to the traditional leaflet or other geospatial packages. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out and take a look at everything that Kyle and his team have put together in mapgl, I highly recommend it, because it is looking like quite a powerful R package that I believe is going to rise to the surface here pretty quickly within the R ecosystem.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the show notes to the vignette section of this package. Kyle's done a spectacular job of documentation here. As somebody who I was telling Mike in the pre-show, I'm still pretty new to the spatial visualization space. This is definitely something, if I was getting in this field, I would take a close look at, because I always have a bias towards those packages that are putting attention to detail in that user experience of getting onboarded quickly. So on top of the getting started vignette, he's got a great section on how to efficiently use the layering system, which again, be very familiar to anybody coming from these spatial packages, the fundamentals of how to design your maps with mapgl. And yes, he does mention one of his original motivations was to plug this into Shiny in the first place. And he wanted to put all this into a concise package that then could be sourced into Shiny quite easily. And he's got a whole vignette dedicated to that, about the inputs that are being exposed. So, of course, like Mike and I know, you can do almost anything you want with Shiny once you get access to these inputs. So he's got a couple great little teaser apps in the vignette that you can get started with. So I think, this is something that we'll be paying close attention to in this space.
It's all open source, so if you feel so inclined to get involved yourself, there's 7 issues out there that I'm sure Kyle would appreciate some help on. So definitely check it out.
Absolutely. So again, links in the show notes, and I'm really impressed with what Kyle has accomplished here. And Kyle is just one of many in the R community that we're impressed with, and we're very fortunate that R Weekly every single week features these great innovations from everybody in the community, because this is a community project, and this is where we'll take a couple of minutes to talk about some additional finds we've seen either in the issue or elsewhere. And from this particular issue, I do want to I had a couple ideas, but again, I've been on a kick recently with some of the great packaging that Bruno Rodriguez has been doing with the Nix ecosystem. I'm not talking about Nix here. I'm talking about a video that he's put into the issue on why, as an R user, you might want to invest into using GitHub Actions. So it's a great 20-minute video, and it's great if you're new to this, because I think a lot of people may have heard about GitHub Actions, but they just don't know where to start. They don't know what's in it for them. Bruno does a terrific job of summarizing it. I will mention, now this maybe not so much applies to his video, more of my random exploits. Debugging GitHub Actions can sometimes feel like you're in the wilderness without any line of sight. And I had that a couple times in the last couple of weeks where I was troubleshooting, get a failure, don't know why, rinse and repeat. The YAML is like the engine to the GitHub Actions. So there's a YAML file where you put in all the steps of your workflow and any associated parameters. So hopefully the teams behind these different steps have good documentation. And I'm fortunate that most of the workflows I was using were authored by either Posit or other members of the community where it was pretty well easily understood how to grok the options and stuff. But sometimes when you try to do things a little different, be prepared for a little debugging time. But once you get it working, my goodness, the peace of mind to say, okay, guess what? That's going to run like once a week, or that's going to run on every PR. I've been doing this with Shiny testing recently. I finally got it working. I was an achievement unlocked with Shiny Test 2 and GitHub Actions, but I finally cracked that nugget. That's just one way you could use GitHub Actions. But like I said, lots of different ways you can use it, from like, automated processes of scraping data from an online source. I do this with that fancy podcast index dashboard that was a runner-up in the table contest recently. So I've been putting that through the paces quite a bit, but it's been a fun learning journey for me. So Bruno does a terrific job of highlighting that in his video.
And I'm not sure if we touched on it last time we spoke because it's been a little while, but congratulations on your runner-up in the table contest. Your app was awesome. They were all incredible. The winner, the Spotify app, was absolutely incredible too. So great job by everybody who participated in that. It's really cool to see the community sort of come together for things like that, which is awesome. One of the blogs that I wanted to shout out is one from Absalon this week, and it is on the power of transitioning to a verse approach in your R package development. It was a really interesting blog post about whether you should take the packages that you may have developed internally and create a sort of tidyverse or farmaverse around them that would allow you to install multiple of those packages at one time. And they talk about sort of the pros and the cons of that, right? Obviously, if there are sort of breaking changes in one package, then you might, sort of be hit by that a little harder if you are sort of leveraging this verse approach in a lot of your applications. But they call out companies like Apple that choose to introduce on purpose breaking features with every other OS iteration, and they sort of effectively eliminate their need to support the legacy software that they create. So it sort of depends.
Ooh, that hurts, but it's so true.
It sort of depends how much you want to support your legacy software and your legacy products a little bit, how sort of what the benefits would be for your end users if they were able to install packages from a verse as opposed to specifying each one individually every time. I have mixed feelings about this, but I can definitely see some particular use cases where it would make sense and some particular use cases where it wouldn't make sense. So it was a really interesting read. It's sort of a topic that I haven't seen discussed very often. So kudos to the Absalon team. And in particular, Fabian He for putting that blog post together. I will do sort of a self-indulgent shout out as well. We had a R package that got a very significant update after 3 years, I think was the last release. It's called Migrate for building state transition matrices. So if that's something that you do, if you work in insurance or credit risk or something like that, maybe of interest to you, some pretty exciting enhancements there.
Oh, congratulations, Mike. That is awesome. 3 years in the making, huh? That's a lot of updates there.
Yes, a lot of updates, a lot of user enhancement requests that people had been very patiently waiting on that hopefully we've gotten across the finish line now.
Oh, that's awesome. And this resonates with me. Back in my dissertation research, I was looking at state transitions of these Markov processes. So yeah, I can definitely see a ton of value into this. So we'll make sure to put a link to your updated package in the show notes, because it is, great job with the vignette, my friend. You're putting the attention to detail on documentation, and I'm here for it.
Thank you. Nope, the transition matrices for Markov processes, that's what it's all about. Sorry we didn't make it sooner for you, Eric.
You were just about 20 some years too late, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm old enough. I don't need to say anymore. But nonetheless, I'm going to definitely check that out if I delve into that world again. But also, we invite all of you to check out the rest of the R Weekly issue. And yeah, we were off for a couple weeks, so don't forget to check that back catalog too. There are a ton of great resources that were shared recently. Really some terrific highlights from the past couple of weeks. So everything's available at rweekly.org. You'll find a link to this issue right at the front page, as well as all the other issues that we curate throughout the years. And it's been many years, and the project keeps on going. But it keeps going because of your support in the community. So again, if you've authored a great new package or updated another package, if you've got a great resource online that you want to share, getting it on the issue is just a pull request away. All linked at the upper right corner of the rweekly.org homepage. It's all Markdown all the time. Markdown is where I live when I can. I do admit I've had a couple instances this past week or two where I've had to go back to PowerPoint and it just doesn't feel right. I love making my stuff in Markdown. It's just so much better. What can I say?
I thought you were going to say Microsoft Word.
Well, yeah, that too, but not as in-depth as the slide-making nightmare that I've had to put myself through. But I went down a rabbit hole.
Who's ready for story time with
our podcast?
Baby!
Little mini story time here. I was trying to convert a PowerPoint that had like these placeholder boxes for putting like text of like, we call these one-pager summaries or whatnot. I thought, hey, you know what that looks like? That looks like a Quirtle dashboard with the cards, just kind of neatly arranged. And I got close, my friend. I got really close. But they want PDF exports of it, and I couldn't quite print it effectively to keep the formatting. But had they stuck with web-based formats, it would have been perfect. But ran to a dead end on that one, so them's the breaks.
I've been there.
Luckily, you won't find those pitfalls when you contribute to our weekly. We're not going to switch formats on you. It's all Markdown. It's staying that way. That's the wave of the future, if I dare say so myself. So links to that at rweekly.org. And, of course, you can get a hold of us in different ways. We have a contact page directly linked in the episode show notes. You can send us a shout-out or a question or a comment. We love hearing from you, especially how you're using these resources in your daily work or your daily exploits in R. And also, you can get a hold of us on the social medias. I am on Mastodon, where I'm at our podcast, at podcastindex.social, as well as sporadically on the Twitter Weapon X thing with at the Rcast. And I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, and you'll find me there. Mike, where can the listeners get a hold of you?
You can find me on Mastodon at Mike_Thomas at fossadon.org. Or you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK. You can see what I'm up to lately.
Yep, that's where I got wind of your awesome package update. So, yeah, stay tuned for more great stuff from you on that platform. And, with that, we were able to dust off the cobwebs, I think, pretty efficiently this week. So we're back in the saddle again. And great to have you joining us or listening to this episode. And we hope to see you again for our next episode of our Weekly Highlights next week.